Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are tackling something pretty huge, trying to synthesize basically 2 million years of environmental history.
Yeah, it's a massive timescale. We're looking at how human activity has driven extinction across the planet.
And our guide for this is a really key paper, Extinction in the Anthropocene,
Yeah.
led by Samuel T. Turvey and Jennifer J. Crees.
Right. What's crucial about this paper and our discussion today is that it forces us to look beyond just the crisis we're in now. It pushes us to trace the roots of our impact,
Yeah.
from very early evolutionary changes right up to the present day.
So the mission really is to chart this accelerating timeline of human influence.
Exactly, and figure out what that long history tells us about the whole idea of the Anthropocene epoch.
And maybe most importantly, what knowing all this past detail means for trying to conserve what's left now.
That's the critical link. Because,
Okay.
look, extinction is natural. We know that from the fossil record. It happens.
But the rate is the issue here, isn't it?
Absolutely. The paper highlights that the current rate of species loss is estimated to be, potentially up to 100 times higher than that long-term background rate.
100 times.
Yep.
That's not natural variation.
No. That huge gap, that's the core problem. Normal extinction plays out over vast geological time. What we seem to be seeing now, and arguably for a while, is rapid ecological change driven predominantly by us.
Okay, let's dig into that history then. The paper suggests looking back as far as 2 million years ago, what happened then? What was the big shift?
It seems to be about a fundamental change in our ancestors' lifestyle, specifically diet.
Right.
You had these bipedal African hominin apes, and they started moving from a mainly plant-based diet towards eating more meat, becoming more carnivorous.
And that had knock-on effects.
Huge ones.
Ah.
As hominins evolved, got smarter, developed tools, eventually things like projectile weapons, they started putting unprecedented hunting pressure on the animals around them, especially the larger vertebrates.
So becoming successful hunters was, in a way, the start of us becoming this major extinction driver.
That seems to be the argument. It set the stage for what came later, particularly during the late Pleistocene, as modern humans expanded out of Africa.
We see this pattern of large animal extinctions following our path.
Precisely. It's staggered, depending on when humans arrived. Australia, maybe as early as 65,000 years ago, you see losses. Then the Americas, arrival around 15,500 years ago. And the impact there was just catastrophic.
How bad was it? Can you give us a sense of the scale of that Pleistocene megafauna loss?
Okay, the numbers are pretty stark. The paper states that almost 2/3, that's 97 genera, of the world's really big vertebrates disappeared by the end of the Pleistocene.
2/3. And megafauna here means animals over, about 44 kilograms?
Yeah, roughly 100 pounds. So we're talking about the genuinely large animals.
97 genera. That's not just species. That's whole groups of related species wiped out. What kind of creatures are we talking about?
Well, you're losing the iconic giants of those eras. Think short-faced kangaroos and those predatory marsupial lions in Australia.
Wow.
And in the Americas, you lose the mastodons, the giant ground sloths, those incredible glyptodons like car-sized armadillos.
Just amazing creatures.
And here's something quite profound the paper notes. The casualties of this expansion weren't just other animals.
Oh.
They included all the other surviving hominins around at the time. Neanderthals, Denisovans, those fascinating island species like Homo floresiensis on Flores.
So our success, Homo sapiens' success, seems directly linked to the disappearance of not just prey animals, but our closest relatives too.
It certainly looks that way. It's a sobering thought.
And the paper really emphasizes that this loss wasn't just, sad because the animals were gone. It had deep, lasting impacts on how ecosystems actually function.
Absolutely. That phosphorus example from Amazonia is a perfect illustration.
Tell us about that again.
Well, megafauna, big animals, they move around a lot. They eat in one place, they poop in another. They're basically giant nutrient transporters.
Right. Moving fertility across the landscape.
Exactly. And the authors estimate that losing the Amazonian megafauna cut the movement of phosphorus, which is often a limiting nutrient for plant growth, away from the rich river floodplains, out into the wider basin by something like 98%.
98% reduction. That must have fundamentally changed the forest over millennia.
It had to. It's a permanent change to the soil chemistry, the structure, the type of vegetation that can thrive there. It's a legacy we still see today.
Okay, but here's where it gets tricky, historically at least. The Pleistocene also saw massive climate shifts, right? Glacial periods ending, warming happening. How do scientists tease apart the impact of human overkill hunting, maybe changing habitats from those huge natural climate changes?
That's been a long-running debate, and it's complex. The paper acknowledges that. But there are strong clues pointing towards human impact, like the fact that the extinctions disproportionately hit the large animals. That size bias isn't typical of extinctions purely driven by climate shifts in earlier geological periods. It suggests a new factor, us.
Okay.
But the most likely scenario, and what the evidence increasingly points to, isn't an either, it's synergy.
Synergy. So climate change and humans working together, basically.
Kind of. Imagine animal populations already stressed, maybe pushed into smaller refuge areas because of climate change ice sheets advancing or retreating. Then along come highly effective new predators, humans with sophisticated hunting tools.
Those already vulnerable populations just couldn't withstand the added pressure.
Exactly. Climate stress made them susceptible, and human arrival delivered the knockout blow in many cases. So the lesson isn't really climate or humans, but climate stress plus humans.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's move forward in time. The climate stabilizes as we enter the Holocene epoch, starting about 11,700 years ago.
Right, and the paper notes that human impacts in the Holocene become, let's say, more straightforward and less contentious.
Because the big climate swings are largely over.
Partly. But also because we see a very clear pattern linked to human movement, specifically our expansion across oceans.
This is the island extinction phase.
Yes, this is where you see catastrophic, often very rapid losses as humans colonize remote island systems for the first time. Madagascar, the Caribbean islands, remote Pacific land masses like New Zealand, Hawaii.
And we're talking about wiping out entire suites of unique animals.
Complete island megafaunas in many cases.
Yeah.
Animals that had evolved in isolation for millions of years. You lose the giant flightless moa birds in New Zealand, the enormous elephant birds in Madagascar, strange endemic sloths and monkeys in the Caribbean. The list is long and tragic.
And it wasn't just hunting these unique creatures, was it? It was also what we brought with us.
That was often the killer blow.
Oh.
Island life often evolves without major ground predators, so they were completely unprepared for.
Rats.
Exactly. Murid rodents, rats, and mice hitchhiking on human boats. They, along with other introductions like pigs or goats, just devastated native plants and animals that had no defenses.
The numbers are shocking. Over 250 mammal species globally gone in the Holocene.
Yes. And the paper points out that over 100 of those were just in the Caribbean basin. Islands were incredibly vulnerable.
Okay, but then there's this interesting point the paper raises, the sort of paradox. If humans were getting better at exploiting environments, why didn't we see the same level of full species extinction on the continents during the Holocene? They call it Holocene underkill.
It's a fascinating question. The leading hypothesis is something called the extinction filter. Meaning that the continents had already been filtered during the Pleistocene. The largest, most vulnerable megafauna were largely gone already, thanks to that earlier wave of human expansion and climate synergy.
Okay, so the easy targets were already missing on the mainlands.
To some extent, yes.
Yeah.
But, and this is crucial underkill in terms of total species extinction, doesn't mean the continents got off scot-free. Far from it.
Right, the impact just looked different.
Yes. There's mounting evidence for widespread population depletion and local extinctions. Animals disappearing from large parts of their former range across continents throughout the Holocene.
Driven by.
Continued hunting pressure, but increasingly large-scale habitat clearance for agriculture and settlements.
So even thousands of years ago, long before the Industrial Revolution, we were already shrinking the ranges of many animals.
Definitely. The paper mentions Europe, for example. About half of Europe's large mammal species saw significant range contractions starting around 3,000 years ago. They didn't all go extinct entirely, but their populations were being pushed back and diminished.
And this leads into another problem for us today, right? Understanding what natural even looked like back then.
That's a huge challenge for conservation setting accurate baselines. We're still debating the pre-human landscape in many places. Was early Holocene Europe, say, wall-to-wall dense forest?
Or was it more open, like a parkland mosaic maintained by large grazing animals?
Exactly. Animals that we then subsequently reduced or eliminated. If we don't know what the baseline natural state truly was, it's really hard to measure the full extent of what's been lost due to human activity since then.
It makes setting restoration goals really tricky. Okay, let's shift gears again and accelerate to what we think of as the modern extinction crisis. The paper uses the year 1500 as a rough starting point.
Yes, that's a common benchmark, often linked to the era of European global exploration and colonization, which started connecting ecosystems and threats worldwide.
And the numbers since then are, well, they're grim.
They are. The IUCN Red List tracks known extinctions. Since 1500, they've confirmed 868 species as extinct. But everyone acknowledges that's a serious underestimate.
Because we just don't know enough about many species, especially invertebrates or deep sea life.
Precisely. And we've seen high-profile losses even very recently. The Yangtze River dolphin, the beiji, declared effectively extinct in 2007. The Christmas Island pipistrelle bat in 2009. These are happening in our lifetimes.
This acceleration leads people to talk about the sixth mass extinction. What makes this current wave different, apart from the speed?
Well, the speed is key again, up to 100 times background rates. But it's also characterized by extinction without replacement. New species aren't evolving fast enough to fill the gaps, and the drivers are intensifying.
This is where Jared Diamond's evil quartets comes in.
Right, that's a useful framework.
Yeah.
Overexploitation, hunting, fishing, harvesting, habitat destruction, deforestation, agriculture, urbanization, the introduction of invasive non-native species, and co-extinctions or trophic cascades knock-on effects through the food web.
But the Turvey and Crees paper emphasizes that we now have to definitively add a fifth major driver to that quartet.
Yes, human-induced climate change. It's no longer just a future threat. It's actively causing extinctions now.
And the prime example they give is heartbreaking.
The bramble cay melames, a small rodent living on one tiny low-lying coral cay in the Torres Strait between Australia and New Guinea.
What happened?
Rising sea levels and increased storm surges, directly linked to climate change, repeatedly inundated its habitat, destroyed the vegetation it relied on. It was declared extinct in 2019, the first mammal confirmed loss solely due to anthropogenic climate change.
And it's not just sea level rise, is it? Extreme weather events, too.
Absolutely. They mentioned the 2018 heat wave in Australia that killed roughly 1/3 of the entire population of spectacled flying foxes in just a couple of days. Heat stress is becoming a major killer.
Another really striking point in the paper is how the pattern of extinction is changing. It used to be quite specific, right? Big animals, island animals.
Yeah, historically, extinctions were often size-biased.
Yeah.
The megafauna went first, or they were geographically clumped, hitting islands particularly hard.
But now
The threats are becoming much more global and systemic. Things like climate change, widespread pollution, infectious diseases spread through trade. They affect species across different groups, different sizes, different locations.
this leads to their concept of the field of bullets.
Exactly. It's less predictable. In the past, maybe you were relatively safe if you were small and lived on a continent. Now, the threats are more pervasive, more random almost. Size and location offer much less protection than they used to.
Can you give an example of that kind of global systemic threat?
Chytridiomycosis is a chilling one. It's a fungal disease devastating amphibian populations worldwide.
How did it spread?
It seems to have been spread globally, largely through the international trade in amphibians for pets, food, research. It reached even remote, pristine rainforests and wiped out frogs and salamanders that had never encountered it before. It doesn't care how big the frog is or where it lives.
That's terrifying. It paints a picture of a world where threats are everywhere.
And the cumulative result of all this history, Pleistocene, Holocene, modern era, is captured in one staggering statistic the paper mentions about mammals today.
The biomass statistic. Yeah, tell us that one.
By weight, by sheer biomass, 96% of all mammals on Earth today are either humans or are livestock, cattle, pigs, sheep, etc.
96%.
Which means all the wild mammals, from elephants and whales down to bats and shrews, make up only 4% of the total mammalian biomass.
4%. It shows how completely we've reshaped the planet's living systems to serve ourselves.
It really underscores the scale of our dominance and the cost to biodiversity.
Okay, so let's bring this back to the paper's framing around the Anthropocene. Geologists are trying to define when this new human-dominated epoch officially began. They often look for a golden spike, a clear global marker in the geological record, maybe around the 1950s with nuclear fallout or plastics.
Right. They want a single, synchronous global signal.
But what does the extinction data tell us about that? Does it support a mid-20th century start?
Not really, no. That's the core message from a biodiversity perspective. The history we've just discussed shows that significant ecosystem-altering human impact didn't start suddenly in 1950.
It's been building for millennia.
Exactly. It's a story of gradual, cumulative, and accelerating resource exploitation and environmental modification that has driven extinctions over vastly different timescales in different places.
So from a biological standpoint, the start of major human impact would be much, much earlier than the 1950s.
Definitely. You can make a strong case for the early Holocene, with the rise of agriculture and the island extinctions. Arguably, You could even push it back to the late Pleistocene megafauna extinctions, or even that initial dietary shift 2 million years ago.
Which means a single golden spike for the Anthropocene doesn't really capture the biological reality of our impact.
It struggles to.
Yeah.
The biological evidence suggests the onset of significant human impact was diachronous. It happened at different times in different regions, linked to human arrival and technological development. It wasn't one single global moment.
So the big implication isn't necessarily about fighting over the exact start date for geologists.
Well, that debate will continue, but the practical implication, the really useful takeaway from understanding this long history of extinction, is for conservation now.
How so?
Because knowing this deep history, how long we've been impacting ecosystems, which species were vulnerable when, what the pre-impact baselines actually looked like is absolutely vital.
It helps us understand present-day vulnerability.
Yes, and it helps us set more realistic and rigorous goals for restoration and conservation. It helps us avoid repeating past mistakes, hopefully. We need that long-term perspective.
Which leaves us with a rather sobering final thought from the paper, doesn't it? About the timescale for recovery.
Yeah. Given the sheer magnitude of the biodiversity loss we've caused, particularly the loss of evolutionary potential locked up in all those extinct lineages.
Recovery isn't something that happens in human timescales, is it?
No. The paper suggests it will likely take millions of years for evolution to generate levels of biodiversity comparable to what existed before significant human impact.
Millions of years. So we are living in and are responsible for creating a significantly impoverished biosphere, a diminished subset of life with less capacity to adapt and evolve in the future.
That's the long-term legacy. It definitely puts our current conservation efforts into perspective.
It certainly does. Well, thank you for guiding us through that immense sweep of history. It's a lot to take in.
It is. But understanding it is crucial. My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.